Okay, so we're starting a new unit today, and earlier in the year, at the beginning, we did a unit on how matter is classified into elements, compounds, and mixtures. And then in the last unit, we kind of took a little bit of a detour, and we talked about the kinetic theory and the particle theory of matter, and how matter is affected as energy is added and the movement of the particles affects the phase change and the characteristics of the matter. Now, in this unit, we come back to where we started with the classification of matter, and that matter was classified as elements, compounds, and mixtures. And this is really our first unit on elements. So, and we'll kind of be following that schedule now. We're going to do a unit on elements, and then we're going to do 2 units on compounds, and then we're going to finish up much of the semester with mixtures. So first we're going to be talking about the structure of the atom and how the elements are named and what the symbols are on the periodic table. So the first thing is, and we talked about this with Dalton's theory already, is that an atom is the smallest particle of matter that retains the properties of the element it came from. So what that means in simple terms is that if you were to split an atom, let's say you split a gold atom, which we don't have the technology to do on Earth, but if you could, it wouldn't be gold anymore. So this is the smallest piece that's still gold. Okay? Which means it cannot be broken down without changing its properties. So we are able to split some atoms like uranium in a nuclear reactor, but afterwards the atoms that got split no longer have the properties of uranium. Each element is identified by symbols, which are abbreviations for the elements that we see on the periodic table. And there are some rules about naming the elements and how they're classified. And one of the first rules is that they can only have 1 capital letter per symbol. Now usually when you turn things in, I'm not too fussy about capitalization and science. But in this case with elements, you really have to get this right. Whether it's uppercase or lowercase really matters, and I'm going to show you why right now. Okay. For example, C stands for carbon. O stands for oxygen. And C lowercase o stands for cobalt. But if we have capital C, capital O, that stands for carbon monoxide. So the only way to really tell is somebody writes CO as to whether or not it's cobalt or carbon dioxide is in a formula. Every time there's a new capital letter, there's a new element. So it's very important that you use the right case. Now, usually the symbol is the first letter or two of the element's name. So like the first letter here is carbon and the symbol is C. The first letter of oxygen is O and its symbol is O. The first 2 letters of cobalt are CO and its symbol is CO. If you look at the periodic table, you'll notice that some of the elements have Latin symbols. And the way you can tell is the names are very different from the symbol. So, for example, AU stands for gold. That's not the first letter or 2 of gold. The Latin word for gold is aurorum. You look at the periodic table, the symbol for silver is Ag. The Latin word for silver is argentum. And iron, its symbol is Fe. And the Latin word for iron is ferrum. So when you see that the letters are very different than their English corresponding word, like the letters for gold, AU is very different than the English word, and silver and iron. Some of the elements are named after the person who discovered them. So if you look, some of the you'll find that sounds like a person's name. Like one of them is Alfred Nobel, after his Nobelium. Okay. Some of the elements are named after the place where they were discovered. And some of the elements are named after planets. And an example would be plutonium is named after Pluto. Now, some of this should be reviewed from the 6th grade, but again, the atom is the smallest piece of matter that studies the properties of the element. And there's 3 parts to an atom. Protons, which have a positive charge. Neutrons, which are neutral. And I underlined this as easy to remember. The first letters of neutral are N-E-U-T-R, and the first letters of neutron are N-U-T-E-R. So, I mean, they have the same first letters. And then electrons are negative. So, we have positive protons, neutral neutrons, and negative electrons. The protons and the neutrons are in the nucleus, or the center of the atom. So they're the ones that we're going to be talking about that give the atom mass. Okay. The smallest particle that makes up a proton or a neutron is called a quark. And there are 6 known quarks. You don't need to know this, but it's kind of interesting to tell you about, since we mentioned them up here. The 6 known quarks are up, and they got really silly names: up, down, top, bottom, strange, and charm. Now, because the atoms are so small and we can't actually look at an individual atom, even with all the technology we have today, scientists use models to represent atoms. So a lot of times when things are either too big for us to describe or see, or too small, we use a model. So for example, when we want to talk about Earth, we use a model like a globe and say, okay, well, this is what Earth looks like, and Russia's over here, and the United States over here, and China's down over there, and Africa's here, and Europe's up there. So we can imagine what the whole globe looks like, or the whole planet looks like, because there's no way for us to see the whole planet all at once because it's too big. And when things are very, very small, like atoms, which are too small for us to see, we use a model so that just like the model of the Earth, we can imagine what it looks like when we look at a globe. When we look at the model of the atom, we can imagine what it looks like. And the model of the atom continues to develop as we learn more about it. So if we're going to talk about how it's changed over time, but we're still continuing to learn more and more about the structure of an atom and how it's made. Now, you guys are going to answer these questions in section 1 on your own, and then we're going to come back and review the answers tomorrow. So I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.